September 30th, 2008, over a dozen identically dressed landscapers would show up in the parking lot between the Jack in the Box and the Bank of America in Monroe, Washington. And in the blink of an eye, $400,000 had disappeared and was floating gently down the river on an inflatable pool tube. What makes someone risk it all? The football scholarship to the University of Idaho, the high school sweetheart, the seemingly perfect life. Well, for Anthony Curcio, it was a deadly combination of a torn ACL and a nasty little pill that promised the world. One that promised complete euphoria, peace, and bliss. Vicodin. The pill became his life. It was a dark and hopeless time for Curcio. Life went on for everyone but me, he says. All my success in life had revolved around this game. Now that I was injured, I was nothing. It stayed this way for many years. His excess drug abuse only increased through failed venture after failed venture, his failures swimming among forged prescriptions. At the worst of his drug addiction, he found a light at the end of the tunnel, a new way to build his life up again. In 2004, with a booming market, Anthony got into real estate. The money started coming in and all was looking well for him. He started a family and settled into a 4,000 square foot home on the lake. But then it happened. 2007, the market crashes and once again Anthony is left at rock bottom. He had failed Emily, failed his family. He wanted desperately to be the man again. All he needed was a little inspiration. And it came when he sat in the parking lot between his local Jack in the Box and Bank of America. All it took was one single vehicle to pull into the parking lot to change the course of his life completely. With one Google search, he was obsessed. It had been done before, so why couldn't he do it? The logo on the truck, Brinks, an American moving company and coincidentally the victim of a previous robbery in the DC area. Next, he chose a bank. Enter the Bank of America branch on Old Owen Road, conveniently nestled up against a creek, asking to be robbed. He chose it because of its easy escape route through Woods Creek, located along the Snohomish River. And so it was time to get to work, and work obsessively like he always had. For 3 months, he surveyed the bank and the truck. He applied mortician's wax, a thick paste that left his skin red and irritated, and wore landscaping gear he bought at a hardware store to disguise himself as a landscaper while he took note of every small detail. The location of the cameras, the time of deliveries, the amount of money, you name it. Remember the creek? This became his perfect escape route. While he initially wanted a much more exciting getaway vehicle, he settled on something much simpler. A yellow and black inner tube with a picture of a hornet on it, which he would pull himself up the creek with a homemade pulley system. It was time for some test runs. During one of these attempts, Curcio stashed his disguise and radio by the Albertsons dumpster in order to practice using his inner tube. A bit later, as he went to pick up his stuff, he ran into a homeless man. They had what at the time was a minor conversation. It went something like this. Hey dude, I wouldn't mess with that stuff. I called the law and they're coming to pick it up. What'd you do that for? Well, look at it. Anyone and his neighbor knows what that's good for. Curcio drove off, spooked, but what was a homeless man going to do to jeopardize his master plan? The last thing Anthony did was post an ad on Craigslist, asking for 15 to 20 workers to help clean up the city, offering a convincing wage. After applying, each man received an email from what they thought was the supervisor, telling them to show up wearing these specific items. If a manager is not there, it concluded somewhat ominously, do not leave. Curcio's motto for the whole heist was concluded simply in his own words. I'm going to do it in the middle of the day. I'm going to be so visible, I'm invisible. And so his plan was set into motion. As he watched his children sleep, no matter how much he wanted to turn back, it was too late. September 30th, 2008, at 11 a.m., the workers started arriving, all dressed in identical landscaping attire, and all standing in the patch of concrete between the Jack in the Box and the Bank of America. Curcio had already been there for a few minutes, pulling weeds outside the Jack in the Box, wearing the same uniform as the other men. For 5 grueling minutes, he waited. Then at exactly 11:05, when the armored truck arrives, he sprints up to the man carrying the bags and pepper sprays him violently. Adrenaline pumping, he grabs the 2 bags the man was holding and makes a run across the parking lot onto the street, heading for the creek. He drops one of the smaller bags around here on Old Owen Road. He then takes the gravel path down to Eagle Park, where he drops his wig, sunglasses, hat, and white particle mask. As pursuers close in on Curcio, he hops into the black and yellow inner tube just in time and pulls himself south along Woods Creek until just past the train tracks. He could almost taste the freedom. He gets off, and at a riverbank, he drops his long-sleeve shirt and 2-way radio. According to his book, Heist and High, he makes his way up the embankment to the side of Highway 2 and hops into his friend's Ford Taurus, leading me to believe that it was parked somewhere just outside the strip mall. The driver makes a left turn onto Main Street. However, as the driver's paranoia surges, he makes another quick left onto a side street and dumps Anthony onto the road. Through my research, it is assumed that he passed through Woods Creek Village, a nearby apartment complex, and in the laundry room he stole a white Polo. Now that he was effectively unrecognizable from the man who stole the money, he made his way to the Windermere office, conveniently right next to the local police station, a station that was currently dealing with a situation Curcio had left behind. At the office, he calls a friend to pick him up. If only the office clerk was more observant, she would have noticed the puddle of water beneath Curcio. His shoes were still soaked. Anthony waits nervously as he is forced to call his lookout because his original driver bailed on picking him up. Finally, after his lookout picks him up, he gets to a Motel 6 in Everett, a nearby town, where they meet with the original driver who bailed. There, they count the money. All 400,000 of it. It's incredible. More than they expected, and more than Curcio had ever seen in his life. The plan had worked. All those months scoping out the bank had been worth it. Now, Curcio could be free from the financial burden that plagued him and his family. Curcio, in his own words, has stated that this was the perfect crime, which at this point, all except a few moments, he was not wrong. Back at the scene, it's chaos. A pepper-sprayed delivery man and over a dozen people who match the description of a criminal. The police are stumped. Detective Tim Buzzell and Barry Hatch are leading the case, and while they find clues strewn around the area, such as the DNA found on the particle mask, they are left without any conclusive suspects. For Anthony, it was time to celebrate his perfect robbery. As he sat in his beautiful hotel room looking at the strip, he thought to himself a simple sentence. How, out of all those people out there, Curcio says, I took a risk that only one in a few million would be willing to take. It was a risk, one that would catch up with him sooner than he would have hoped. Around the same time Anthony was partying, the police were starting to close in through some unlikely leads. The day after the crime, one of the sergeants on the case remembered something interesting that had occurred a few weeks back. They recalled that they were approached by a city worker named Randy Oish, a few weeks before the heist. Seems unimportant, however, what Randy had to say was now seeming more crucial. According to Randy, he had been fixing a sewer near the bank when he was approached by a homeless man who had apparently found a disguise and radio near the Albertsons dumpster. Bozell and Hatch were intrigued with this lead, so they met with Randy directly to talk about the incident. However, his intel on the situation was, to say the least, quite vague. The homeless guy had a beard, I think, and a dog. But this was the police's only lead, so they pursued it. And so Barry and Tim went off to Sultan, a foggy small town off the Snohomish River where the local homeless were known to camp. Through asking locals, they were able to negotiate their way to the base of a small overpass off Highway 2 near an empty school bus. Outside a white and blue tent, they found a guy who matched Randy's description. A man with a long beard, and what do you know? A dog snoozing by his side. The man looked up from his crossword puzzle at the cops and smiled wide. He simply said, "It's about time you got here." This man, who had only been known as the man with a beard and a dog, was none other than Alan Dean. As it turns out, Alan Dean had read about the manhunt in the papers and was waiting for the cops to track him down. Originally from the Ozarks, he was 53 years old and had been hoping to save up enough money to buy a car and drive back down to Arkansas to see his kids. He told the detectives about the fateful day when he saw a young man jump out of his car to retrieve heist paraphernalia. He was suspicious, so he wrote down the license plate number. 424 WBB. This man, who Anthony thought so little of at the time, was now going to pull the plug on his perfect heist. "You know the funny thing," he says, "I grew up in Monroe and never once saw a homeless guy. Maybe he was some kind of angel." From here, the police only got closer. They searched up the license plate and found that it led back to one Emily Curcio, Anthony's wife. Interestingly enough, when the police showed Dean photos of Anthony, he could not properly recall the face, and admitted that he was more focused on the items and the car. Nonetheless, the FBI started surveillance on Anthony around his home in Lake Stevens, Washington. On October 6, 2008, the police obtained their last crucial piece of evidence. They followed Curcio to a gas station where he discarded a drink bottle. Little did he know, this one move would come back to haunt him. The FBI sent the bottle to get DNA tested, and on October 28, 2008, it was revealed that the DNA found on the mask and the DNA found on the bottle matched. Not even a week later, the FBI would close in on Anthony. On November 3, 2008, he pulled into the parking lot of a Target in Monroe, driving his brand new Range Rover. He had arranged a money drop with a friend, $17,000 cash in his safe. But as soon as he got out of his car, he saw the police coming his way. It was the final moment of his freedom, of being able to see his children. Should I run? Should I fight? With nothing left in his tank, Curcio got on his knees. Pretentiously and quite pathetically, he whined, "This is slander. Do you know who my parents are?" In July 2009, Curcio was sentenced to 6 years in federal prison for the crime. In the end, the guy who feared losing his house got busted by a man who didn't have one. A man nobody expected anything from, including Anthony. With his reward, quite poetically, Dean bought himself a Nissan Pathfinder and was finally able to return to his family. Curcio served 5.5 years behind bars and was released in April of 2013. Since then, Anthony, seemingly reformed, has gone into a career of public speaking for schools, being in several BuzzFeed videos and interviews, and writing children's books, all in a hope to educate the youth on crime and mistakes. However, this is not the Anthony Curcio I want to leave you off with, because this story sadly does not have a happy ending. As in early 2024, Anthony was arrested once again, in connection to a trading card scam that he was running with a friend. As much as he wants to change, he really cannot. I believe that these two quotes paint a very real picture about Anthony Curcio and his wife, Emily. "I lost everything," he says, "and all I wanted to do was provide for my family." Although he says he did it for his family, I believe that he actually risked his family for the money.